Hi, welcome, Amy. Thanks for coming to our Community Partner Showcase. So I know that you're the national president of the Chinese Canadian National Council for Social Justice. So, and you've been, working with us very closely on a number of collaborative anti-racism initiatives. So maybe you can start by sharing a little bit about what CCNCSJ is about and how it all come together.
So Chinese Canadian National Council for Social Justice is a relatively new organization. We are incorporated in 2019. However, the people behind CCNCSJ are not new. Most of us were involved in CCNC, which is the first Chinese Canadian National Council, an advocacy national body that promotes social justice and equity. So CCNCSJ actually had the same mission in terms of educating, advocating, and engaging the communities to achieve social justice and equity for all. So the organization is is really here to engage the community to promote anti-racism. And in fact, during the last year, because of the pandemic, we have been very active in leading and also advocating and working with our partners in promoting anti-Asian and anti-Chinese racism and really trying to address the inequities in our system.
Mm-hmm. So, so I understand then like CCNCSJ is kind of a renewed organization that built with a really rich legacy of community activism, right? And so how does CCNCSJ and CCNC Toronto chapter works together?
Mm.
Like, what's the
So,
relationship?
right. So CCNC SJ and CCNC Toronto are partners. We are two distinct and independent organizations, but we are natural partners. CCNC, because of our shared goals and values and mission and vision. So that's why our first partner, one of our first partner is CCNC Toronto in all our campaigns, as well as projects to address anti-Asian and anti-Chinese racism.
Mm-hmm. So I guess one of the key focus of CCNCSJ in the last year or so has been related to the COVID-related racism, right? So do you wanna how did that plan came about? Like, what were the needs that you were witnessing in the community that kind of prompted all these action?
Right. So CCNCSJ actually initiated the first press conference together with the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic, and we actually invited CCNC Toronto to that press conference back in late January when the first case, January 25th, was the first case of COVID being found in Canada. And because of our experience during SARS, right? So 18 years ago, SARS hit, and it hit Toronto particularly. And in fact, it has led to rising racism and targeted hate and discrimination against Chinese and Chinese Canadian community at the time. So we were very concerned that this was the history is gonna, repeat itself. And lo and behold, we were right. But in fact, it was far worse than we had anticipated even back in January. We knew it's gonna be bad, but we didn't know that it was this bad. And well, first of all, because the pandemic has really hit hard, right? Worldwide, Canada, Toronto, no one was exempt. But the impact on Chinese and Asian Canadian communities was far worse than we had anticipated because the racism, the entrenched and historical racism that we had experienced with really amplified through individual attacks and hate crimes, as well as, of course, the further entrenched the systemic inequities, vis-a-vis racialization of poverty and higher unemployment rate and all that. And the pandemic has just made everything worse and really highlighted these disparities and these systemic structural injustice.
So I know that you've done a number of surveys and study at the beginning of the pandemic, right? To kind of document the incidence of racism. What did you find from those study?
Right. So CCNC Toronto actually started a website in February. So we actually reached out to them when we were seeking funding from the federal government, from Heritage Canada, to do a project, and included their effort into our project. And so through their website, it is an online reporting tool for people to report individual incidents, including the experiences that they have personally experienced and encountered, as well as that they have witnessed through in directly as well as online. And so that data was actually we collected or we reached out to Vancouver, a project called 1907, and the two projects collaborated and share data and share analysis. So as of end of December 2020, over 700 cases were reported through these two websites. And this to us was just the tip of the iceberg. These were the people who took the time to report. However, there were many, even amongst my own circles of friends and families, many of us did not report their encounters and their experiences.
Mhm. Yeah, so we know that from our own social circle and family experiences, there is a lot more different levels of racism experience that hasn't been reported. I guess it's important to recognize that first of all, it does take a mental toll on the person who experienced it, and also a lot of times when we experience like microaggression or something that is more subtle or nuanced, is kind of hard to report as well, right? So I think is the two is important. I think the numbers really is just showing the tip of an iceberg. So I think, but I think it's important for people to really speak up and share that experience, though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in response to all these incidents, what have CCNCSJ been doing? I know you've launched a number of educational campaign and so on. Maybe you can take us through that.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is to share with you our website where we actually host all these information. And I'm
So
actually
first campaign, I think you did quite
Yes, it's
early.
called, that's right. We have Stop the Spread of Racism. Just the background to this was an ad company came to CCNC and approached us back in February and say, well, we would like to collaborate with you because we think this was wrong. And so they did all the work in terms of designing the logo. It's called the Stop the Spread of Racism. And they did a video, a very well made, professionally done video to raise awareness. And then on the day of the campaign, they went with Dr. Joseph Wong, one of the directors of CCNCSJ, to Union Station, to City Hall, to give out these, bottles of hand sanitizer in hazmat suits to raise awareness. And the campaign, successfully drew attention to the rising racist attacks against Asian and Chinese Canadians. And so that sowed the seed for us. When we approached the federal government for funding, we wanted to expand that message through social media. So what we did was we printed, a mask with the Stop the Spread logo and reached out to social media influencers and high-profile Canadians such as Patrick Chan, such as other, actors and actresses, as well as, of course, politicians from all levels of government to help spread the word of stopping the spread of racism. And so through these supporters, about 60 of them, we've reached 500 people online through that campaign. While we successfully reached that number, we also drew those trolls, right? The racist trolls on social media and hate mails. I personally have encountered them. And while we are doing this campaign throughout, and it really illustrated there are supporters out there, as well as there's such deep-seated racism out there that there are people unabashedly would the white supremacists, and nationalists will come and attack you. And so as part of that project, which is a collaboration with CCNC Toronto, as well as the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic, as well as the Civic Engagement Network in Vancouver. We also launched a Face Race campaign. And that campaign actually is to provide resources online to talk about anti-racism, to give some context and more information and resources, and give some more meat to this whole discussion. And this campaign, this Face Race campaign, addresses the various aspect. First of all, we talk about, what does racism look like, to us? And so through different stories of individuals, we talk about racism and the as you said, Alan, that psychological, physical, that toll that are experienced by victims of direct attack of racism. And we also talk about, allies, like people on the front line, people who are trying to do their best to call out racism, and the various campaigns that we are trying to do to call out allies, including the one that we work with Protect through the City of Toronto for All campaign. That campaign actually was launched by the city. They reached out to CCNCSJ, and we of course readily accepted the invitation and reached out to our allies in Korean Canadian, Japanese Canadian, and organizations like yours to help spread the word of, of targeted anti-Asian, East Asian racism. And so we launched that campaign, and that campaign actually reached 1 million people purely through social media. And then we also have, of course, our Stop the Spread of Racism. But before, I also want to premise that the Face Race campaign also call out to Asian Canadians that we need to recognize the hierarchy of racism and the structural racism that has differentially impacted not just Asian, but more importantly, Black Canadians, as well as Indigenous communities. We are settlers. We need to recognize the colonization impact on Indigenous community. We have to express our solidarity and work in solidarity for truth and reconciliation. We also, of course, need to express our solidarity and support for Black Lives Matter and other campaign to address the deep-seated racism against Black Canadians. So this is the website, and then like a Face Race campaign. And then the other parts of the Face Race campaign is we talk about COVID-19 stories, and these are personal stories. We invited some, to be able to write about, their experiences through COVID-19. And the key thing is that this whole campaign is to raise awareness and also to talk about being Chinese Canadian. It is an identity that is important to highlight. It is an identity that is unique to us Chinese, and we need to really share that and explore that and discuss the various nuances and impact and understanding of that. And Face Race campaign aims to do that. And then the last piece is a set of toolkits or resources that we gather online, as well as from other sources, to help people address and confront racism if they are caught in that unfortunate situations. And of course, we call people to keep safe. The most important, to stay safe and make sure that you are safe before you take any actions, be it at the moment or afterwards. And we also are in the process and will soon be launching a toolkit for guardians and children. And these are for young children, grade 3 to 5, to talk about racism. Because throughout this last year, CCNCSJ had an opportunity to talk to not only English-speaking communities, but also Chinese Canadian communities, seniors, as well as parents and newcomers or longtime residents and Canadians who actually are still trying to figure out, how do I talk about racism, even though they may have encounter racism in the workplace and in their day-to-day encounter, they actually don't know how to actually analyze it, or how to actually come to terms and or try to understand that. And so this toolkit is to enable guardians and children to have a frank and honest discussion. We noticed that many children who even encounter microaggression do not want to talk about that. They dismiss them as jokes because out of self-preservation, but also because of the lack of understanding and an opportunity to explore that. So we are working on that. We'll soon be launching that. And coincidentally, Ontario Science Centre has approached CCN-CSJ to do a similar but different project, which is also to discuss anti-Asian racism through their online resources and to raise awareness about, again, this unique Canadian experience of the Asian Canadian communities throughout the pandemic. And I think it is, again, important to keep this topic, racism, alive, because it is very much alive. The virus of racism is far deeper and far long-standing than just the COVID-19.
So it's great that it's obviously CCN-CSJ and its partners done a great deal of work, and we look forward to the new resource kits for caregivers, guardians, parents, and to communicate with young people coming out. And we will definitely link all the toolkits and resources to our website as well. So in closing, looking forward, what do you think that as individuals and as members of the communities, what kind of joint action and things we can do to support our collective effort to advance anti-racism and social justice in the context of this pandemic?
Right. So, I mean, ProTech is very much our ally. We share similar goals in terms of public education, raising awareness, and we encourage ProTech and other organizations to also be engaged in advocacy, promoting systemic changes, policy changes through various levels of government, as well as we also encourage ProTech and CCNC and other allies that, that we have to be all hands on deck. We have to be sort of like all be in it together. And in it together means that Chinese Canadians, as well as other Canadians community, each and every one of us has to take our responsibility seriously in terms of our position, use our position and whatever privilege or may not have, but the power that we may or may not have to extend our influence the best that we can to address, to confront racism within ourselves and amongst us and also beyond us. And I think it is important to do that cross collaboration to ensure that each and every single Canadian, including Chinese Canadian, takes that responsibility seriously. Otherwise, there will be no end to this. Otherwise, racism will always be with us and for a long time to come.
Is there any current policies or things that we should be more aware of and try to advocate together on that you're working on?
Right. So CCNC throughout has also been doing submissions, together with the legal clinic and all that. So we have we have submitted to the federal government in terms of how to make sure that the anti-racism mandate of the federal government in terms of the anti-racism strategy that nationally that we have should be encompassing and should also specifically address anti-Asian racism, given that the experiences that we have collectively shared throughout the pandemic. We also have talked about economic devastation experienced by Chinese Canadians, racialization of poverty. Chinese Canadians are experiencing high incidence of poverty, high incidence of unemployment. So when we talk about anti-poverty strategy, we need to talk about racism in employment, in access services, in access social benefits, benefits and all that. Otherwise, again, this differential impact will always be felt. We also, of course, are also talking about access to services. Recently, CCN-CSJ actually did a submission to the Long-Term Care Commission in Ontario, highlighting racism in long-term care. Long-term care is no different from other institutions, and the entrenched racism actually has barred Chinese Canadians as well as other racialized seniors from accessing the system, as well as the differential impact because of that. Racialized seniors tend not to go into long-term care. However, the attention that we are paying to long-term care now, if we are not changing the entrenched racism in the system, Chinese Canadian seniors will continue to be underserved and not served. As well, the seniors who are out in the communities will forever be ignored and left out. And these are mostly racialized seniors who will not get the attention and resources. So these are various things that CCN-CSJ has been doing.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to recognize that racism actually filters to all areas of life and is interconnected, to employment, to housing, to service access, to immigration, and the different policies that affect many different areas of our lives. So I think by speaking up and by taking action and by supporting each other, I think we can hopefully collectively continue to advance social justice for all. So thank you so much, Amy, and we look forward to inviting you back to share the new resources when it comes out.
Thank you.